The stars had always been silent watchers, cold, distant, unfeeling, but when the silence finally broke, it didn't bring peace, discovery, or celebration. It brought chains. The first contact didn't come in glory. It came in surrender. Massive, alien ships darkened the skies of Earth like metal gods arriving for judgment. They didn't negotiate. They didn't threaten. They harvested. Within a week, Earth's governments collapsed under the pressure of orbital bombardments and technology far beyond their comprehension. Cities burned while the aliens, known only as the Thalkan, descended in towering machines. To round up the survivors, the message was clear and cruel. You are not special, you are property. Humans were tagged, sorted, and loaded like cattle onto freighters bound for slave worlds. Resistance was brief and always fatal. But while the rest of the galaxy saw humans as fragile prey, easily broken, what they didn't understand, what they'd never faced, was the human spirit. And you can't enslave something that was born of fire, raised in struggle, and baptized in the chaos of a world built on survival. In the slave camp of Zerath 5, deep in the industrial guts of Thalkan territory, one such human, the wrong, kind to put in a cage, opened his eyes for the first time under an alien sun. Dane Cade, a former Marine, wasn't supposed to survive Earth's fall, but when the Thalkan dragged him off a burning battlefield, half dead, they thought they'd claimed just another useful meat sack. They didn't know Earth didn't raise prey. It bred predators. The camp was brutal. Acid rains swept over. The compound twice a week. Food came once every 3 days, ration cubes that tasted like grease and regret. The guards wore neural stingers, enough to shut down a human's nervous system with a flick. Anyone who resisted died in front of the others. Slowly. But Dane didn't resist. Not yet. He watched. He watched as aliens from other conquered worlds were beaten into obedience. He watched how the Thalkan rotated their guards every 2 weeks. He watched how the supply drones came down through a blind spot in the outer turret array. He memorized patterns, power surges, guard shifts. He counted crates, measured distance between towers. He listened to the languages, the commands, and he waited, because predators don't fight out of anger. They strike when they know they'll win. Dane was assigned to the mining sector, a kilometer-deep trench of obsidian rock where the air was thick with metal dust. Each day he broke stone beside others, timid, hollow-eyed beings from across the stars. They'd all accepted their fate. He hadn't, and slowly, silently, he began to speak to them, not in commands, not in hope, but in anger. "You think this is life?" he whispered to a blue-skinned humanoid named Trass one night under the steel sky. "You think lying down and dying slow is your future?" Trass flinched. "It is survival." "No," Dane said, leaning closer. "It's submission. You think they broke you? You don't even know what broken looks like yet, but we'll show. Them? We'll show them what it means to bleed." He didn't need many, he didn't need loud, he needed willing. It started with stolen food rations, then stolen tools, then a power module ripped out from a forgotten drone in Sector C-12. Bit by bit, over months, he built something ancient in its simplicity and unstoppable in its message, a reason to fear humans again. By the time the rebellion started, there were only 10 of them. Only 10 had the guts to stand when the stingers crackled, to charge when the alarms rang. But it didn't matter. Dane didn't plan to win. He planned to ignite, because fire doesn't ask permission. And Earth? Earth didn't raise prey. It raised the kind of monster that gets back up, burning. When the explosion ripped through the west gate and the sky lit with stolen plasma fire, the camp descended into chaos. Dane stood tall, face bloodied, fists raw, and screamed a war cry in a language the Thalkan would never understand, but would come to fear for generations. "You should have killed us all." Smoke still curled from the shattered west gate. The sirens, high-pitched and alien, screamed across the skies of Zerath 5, calling for reinforcements. But by the time the Thalkan guards responded, the damage was already done. Bodies lay scattered, some alien, some human. Most of the camp's automated turrets had been turned inward, corrupted by Dane's rewired control rods. He hadn't just planned an escape. He'd planned a statement, and the galaxy had just heard it loud and clear. Dane limped through the debris, one arm cradling a burn that ran up his ribs. His other hand gripped a plasma rifle, still hot from overuse. Behind him followed the 10, bloodied, bruised, but no longer slaves. They weren't just running, they were chasing something bigger. Hope wasn't the goal, revenge was, but they had a problem. The camp's communications relay had gone silent, not because it was destroyed, but because it had transmitted. Dane knew what that meant. Reinforcements, bigger ships, heavily armed patrols. The Thalkhan didn't tolerate defiance, especially not from low-tier organic workers. They wouldn't just retaliate, they would erase. "We've got maybe 12 hours before they descend," Dane said, kneeling near the fractured control console. Sparks flew. He didn't flinch. "So we either dig in and die like cornered animals, or we take the fight to them." "Take the fight to what, Dane?" Trass asked, still holding a wound across his midsection. "We have no ships, no armor, barely enough firepower to hold this ground." "Good," Dane growled, looking back at the others. "Because we're not holding it. We're hijacking their ship." The plan was insanity. But in war, insanity was often the only real weapon humans had left. While the others hesitated, Dane's mind was already racing. He remembered the landing pad, Sector 6, high security, controlled manually by the Overseer, a brutal Thalkhan captain named Jorvex, known for personally executing rebels with his triple-blade gauntlet. Dane had seen the bastard up close once. It hadn't been fear he felt. It had been recognition. Predator to predator. They moved in the shadows, ducking under twisted wreckage and avoiding security drones that now spun wildly, struggling to re-establish network link. Every moment was tight, every breath calculated. But adrenaline made things clearer, sharper, and humans, they were made for this kind of madness. They reached Sector 6 just as the sky broke with a roar, an armored Thalkhan gunship descending like a god from orbit. Its undercarriage opened, revealing the black-armored warriors inside, each one bred for slaughter. Dane smiled like a wolf seeing fresh meat. "They came fast," said one of the rebels, panic creeping into her voice. "Good," Dane muttered. "Means they didn't bring tanks, just pride." The first shots tore the air apart. Plasma screamed across the landing field, vaporizing stone and steel. But Dane and his crew had already moved, flanking the squad from beneath the docking platforms. Explosions rocked the air. Screams, alien and human, blended into one cacophony of death and rage. Dane didn't fight like a soldier anymore. He fought like an animal. He tackled a Thalkhan warrior to the ground, ripping off its respirator, slamming its skull against the landing strut until black blood poured out. Another alien charged him. He shot it point blank in the throat. There was no order, no clean tactics, just raw primal war. And for the first time the Thalkhan hesitated. They had fought armies. They had crushed civilizations. But they had never fought a species that fought like it wanted to die as long as it took you with it. Dane kicked open the command bay doors just as Jorvex stepped down, tall, armored in black chrome, blades humming at his wrists. "You," Jorvex growled, "the animal that started this infection." Dane spat blood and grinned. "You should have gutted me when you had the chance." Jorvex moved like lightning. His gauntlet flashed forward, but Dane ducked, slammed the barrel of his rifle against the alien's leg, and fired. Bone shattered. Jorvex howled, but it wasn't enough. The Thalkhan surged back, slashing through Dane's armor, cutting deep into his side. Pain exploded, but Dane didn't fall. Humans don't fall. With a scream, he grabbed a dropped grenade from the floor, shoved it into Jorvex's gut, and tackled the captain through the blast doors, into the void of the hangar. The explosion was deafening. Fire painted the sky red. When the smoke cleared, Dane was gone. But so was Jorvex. The rebels, bloodied, wide-eyed, stood on a conquered landing zone. And above them, the gunship waited, waiting for someone to take it. Trass stepped forward, staring at the wreckage, then at the others. "He said we weren't prey." He looked at the burning crater and nodded once. He was right. They took the ship, not because they knew how to fly it, but because Dane had taught them one thing above all else. You don't wait to be worthy. You take what you're not supposed to have. Trask sat at the helm, his blue fingers twitching nervously. Over the alien controls, symbols in the Thalkan tongue pulsed across the glass interface. He didn't understand a single glyph, but he didn't need to. Dane had shown them how to read what mattered. Patterns, power lines, pressure valves. Behind him, the few remaining rebels were scattered around the ship, wounded, coughing, trying to patch together what was left of themselves. A mix of species, none alike, but all carrying the same look in their eyes now. Not fear, but the cold fire of purpose. The ship groaned as Trask slammed a random sequence of buttons. The engines fired. Scream of plasma cracked the platform as the ship lifted violently into the storm-drenched sky of Zerath 5, leaving behind a burning slave camp, a pile of dead guards, and a legacy that would echo through the stars. They didn't have a destination. They had only a direction, toward the heart of Thalkan space. Days blurred. The ship ran on emergency rations and stolen oxygen tanks. Most of the crew had never flown anything before. Trask managed to keep them alive by sheer instinct, and the few tips Dane had hammered into him over sleepless nights back in the mines. But something was wrong. The closer they got to Thalkan central systems, the more interference crept into. Their sensors, static on the comms, weird radiation signatures, and then the voice. It came through the ship's old comm unit in a language none of them should have understood, but somehow did. You are trespassing. Identify, or be erased. It wasn't Thalkan. It was something worse. The crew froze. Trask looked back at the others, uncertain. Then a sound echoed from deep in the ship, a metallic thump. Then another. A figure walked out of the shadows, bloody, limping, burned beyond recognition. But alive, Dane. His armor was half gone, skin charred, but his eyes, those cold human eyes, still burned like fire under ice. How? Trask gasped. I made him eat the grenade, Dane rasped, dragging a half-functional stasis pack behind him. Tumbled into a backup vent shaft, blacked out. Woke up yesterday, tracked your heat trail. The crew stared in disbelief. He shouldn't have been walking. He shouldn't have been breathing. But that was the thing the galaxy didn't understand. Yet, you can't kill a predator just because it's bleeding. Dane limped to the console and listened again to the voice. He frowned. That's not Thalkan, that's... He paused. Sovereign code. Trask blinked. The ones the Thalkan are afraid of. The ones they stole their tech from, Dane replied. Which means we're close to the edge of forbidden space. The crew grew quiet. Everyone had heard the rumors. The Sovereigns weren't conquerors, they were exterminators. They didn't enslave, they deleted. No warnings, no mercy. Turn back? Someone asked quietly. Dane looked around, blood leaking down his side. They already think we're animals. Let's show them what our species does when it's caged. He typed a short command into the console. The ship's beacon went live, broadcasting a looped signal in raw binary code. The message was simple. We are human. We do not kneel. A long silence followed. Then, a response, not verbal. A pull. The ship jerked forward, dragged like a ragdoll into a fold of reality that split space like wet paper. Lights exploded. Systems screamed. The crew blacked out. When they awoke, they were no longer in the same galaxy. Outside, the viewport, an artificial star pulsing with impossible architecture around it. A city that stretched across dimensions. Ships like floating gods drifted silently, watching, and one of them moved. It docked with the human vessel in complete silence. Dane stood up, barely, as the airlock cycled. If I die in there, he said, quietly, make sure they know. Earth doesn't raise prey, it breeds predators. And then the door opened, and the Sovereigns finally met a human face to face. The Sovereign ship was silent, dead silent, as if sound itself didn't dare exist in its presence. Dane stood in the airlock, face half-burned, eyes unblinking. Behind him, the rebels watched from the viewport, holding their breath. Trask gripped the edge of the console like it could anchor him to something sane, but there was nothing sane about what they were witnessing. The Sovereign ship didn't open. A door. It unfolded. Reality bent, peeled open like a flower made of light and steel, and from within stepped a being unlike anything they'd ever seen. It didn't walk, it glided. 7 feet tall, robed in a mesh of liquid metal, its face a shifting mask of patterns, no mouth, no eyes. Just an ever-changing map of symbols that pulsed like thoughts, but Dane didn't flinch. The being tilted its head, then a voice, not heard but felt, echoed through his bones. You are not aligned, not Thalkan, not coded. You are unstructured. I'm human, Dane said flatly. Earthborn. The being paused. We know your world. It was quarantined. Why? Because your kind is unfinished, Dane snorted. Funny. That's what they said before they put us in chains. The Sovereign's form flickered, like static in human shape. You are violent, unpredictable, driven by emotion over logic, primal. We're survivors, Dane said, stepping forward. You call it primal, I call it alive. The Sovereign didn't answer for a long time. Behind Dane, the cruise signal continued to pulse through space. We are human. We do not kneel. Then the Sovereign asked something unexpected. Why did you come here? Because they think we're prey, Dane growled. And we wanted to show someone, anyone, what happens when prey stops running. You seek revenge. No, Dane said. We seek respect. For a moment the chamber brightened. Dozens of other sovereign presences shimmering into existence. They didn't speak, but Dane felt them all watching. Not in hatred, not in fear, in curiosity. The lead sovereign floated closer. You tore a military camp apart with your hands. You weaponized junk. You hijacked a ship and survived a sovereign pulsefold. Your brainwaves do not match any species we have categorized. You are an anomaly. Dane smiled, teeth stained with blood. We're predators. That's why the Thalkan keep trying to cage us. Another flicker of thought. We gave them your world, allowed them to test you. You were a simulation to them, a survival exercise. Dane's fists clenched. So you're the ones who let them burn our planet? We do not intervene, we observe, but perhaps observation was premature. Another pause. You are dangerous, not because of strength, but because you do not accept limitations. You're damn right. The sovereigns fell into a silent telepathic discussion. A web of thought beyond comprehension stretched through the chamber, millions of decisions, billions of projections. And then, without ceremony, they came to a conclusion. We will reclassify your species. You are not prey. You are not asset. You are some variable. The Thalkan violated containment protocol. That experiment is now terminated. Dane blinked. Terminated how? The Sovereign turned, and through the ship's transparent wall, Dane saw dozens of Sovereign ships unfold from subspace, shimmering around the planet Zerath 5. Observe. A single beam fired. Not explosive, not fiery, just pure erasure. Zerath 5. Disappeared from existence in a ripple of silence. No explosion, no shockwave. Just gone, like it had never been there. Dane staggered. You just wiped it out. They attempted to domesticate your kind. That is no longer permitted. Another thought pulsed into his head. We will monitor your evolution. If you say ascend, we may speak again. Dane gritted his teeth. And if we don't, then the galaxy will decide what you become. Predator or extinction. The Sovereign began to phase out. Dane stepped forward. We're not done yet. You are for now, but we are not your enemy, human. We are the mirror. And then the ship was gone. The rebels screamed as they were pulled back through folded space. The Sovereign city vanished. Reality snapped. Back, and they found themselves in orbit above Earth. Their Earth scarred, burned, but still turning. They were home. The ship groaned as it broke through Earth's atmosphere, descending in a violent streak of light like a fallen god returning to the soil. Alarms rang across the ruined planet's crust, but there were no armies left to scramble. No government, forces, no satellites to intercept the signal. Earth had been gutted, its skies torn open months ago by Thalcan fire. What remained were tribes, fractured pockets of survivors, living in ruins and memory. As Dane looked out through the cockpit window, he didn't see a planet anymore. He saw a graveyard, skyscrapers like broken teeth, forests scorched down to black ash, oceans boiled and islands shattered. He saw where he had trained, where he had fought, where he had buried his family. He saw the price of being prey, and he vowed it would never happen again. They landed just outside the wreckage of what used to be Geneva, once the seat of diplomacy. Now a skeleton under soot. Trask stepped out behind him, silent, cautious. The other survivors, rebels turned warriors, emerged into the wind that smelled like old blood and ozone. And still, Earth greeted them with silence. But humans always find a way to speak through silence. Within a day, the ship's signal had reached survivors across the planet. They came in tattered uniforms, with old-world guns, rusted machines, and stares that had forgotten softness. Not all believed at first that Dane was real, until he stepped up onto the broken stone of a fallen UN monument and addressed them all. They came to teach us fear, Dane shouted to the gathering crowd, his voice rough, cracked but strong. But we were born in fear. You want to scare us? You better bring more than orbitals and laser fire. You better bring extinction. He held up a piece of Thalcan armor, bloodied, cracked. This is what they are, metal and ego. That's all. But we're nightmares wrapped in skin. We were crawling out of jungles while their ancestors floated in data clouds. We hunt what hunts us. Someone shouted from the crowd. What now? Dane's eyes darkened. Now. We stop hiding. We stop surviving. We stop pretending Earth was ever peaceful. He pointed at the ship behind him. We rebuild, not to protect, but to strike back. Silence. Then someone cheered, then another, until thousands were roaring, fists in the air, old flags rising from the dust like phoenix wings. A new command center was built in the bones of the UN bunker. Dane's crew mapped out Thalcan territory, using stolen schematics. The sovereigns didn't contact them again, but their silence was permission enough. Within weeks, old orbital weaponry was dug up and repurposed. Crashed ships were stripped for drives and weapons. Cities were converted into hives of war production. Engineers worked beside former slaves. Soldiers trained children how to hold a weapon, not out of cruelty, but out of understanding. The galaxy wasn't going to play fair. So neither would Earth. Dane watched from a rusted balcony as a new warship took shape. Black steel, scarred with the DNA of Earth's revenge. A vessel made from stolen tech and human ingenuity. A predator just like them. It would be the first of many. They called it the Apex. One night Trask found Dane alone, staring at old stars. You think they'll ever leave us alone? Trask asked. No, Dane said, his voice low. But that's not the goal anymore, Trask frowned. Then what is? Dane turned to him, eyes burning with a quiet fury. To make them regret ever learning our name. 5 years later, the Thalcan homeworld burned. No warning, no speech. Just death delivered in silence, by ships that didn't broadcast, didn't negotiate, and didn't retreat. Ships with hulls that bore 7 letters, HUMANS. No one enslaved Earth again. No one even tried. Because the galaxy finally understood what Dane Cade had always known. Earth doesn't raise prey, it breeds predators.